Might help if I unmuted myself. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all doing well this morning or evening or whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome to our presentation on academic conduct and academic integrity. If you haven't been in a presentation with me yet, my name is Caroline Omaleski. I am from the Office of International Affairs. I am our office's liaison with the Committee on Academic Misconduct, which is the body on campus that assesses cases of academic misconduct when they're suspected. So I work with all of the international students who are charged with academic misconduct. So I will be talking with you today about how to stay on the right side of that process. So how to avoid misconduct in the first place, what Ohio State's standards are for academic integrity, and what the expectations are for you. I'm also joined today by Jacob Chang, who is a student just like you. He is an undergraduate student who is in student government and also a panelist on the Committee for Academic Misconduct. Jacob, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself and say hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jacob Chen. I use he, him pronouns, and I serve as the Senior Director of Operations for the undergraduate student government. And I'm also a panelist, like a undergraduate student representative on the Committee on Academic Misconduct.
Thanks, Jacob. So Jacob will also be, after my presentation, he'll share a little bit about his experiences with this issue and give probably some even more examples of what he sees. So I will go ahead and share my screen to give my presentation. You get that pulled up here. All right, just in the chat box, if you can't hear me well enough or can't see my screen for some reason or something, just type a message and I will check that. So we will go ahead and get started. So this is a presentation, again, about academic integrity, academic conduct, misconduct, which hopefully will be helpful for you. We see that unfortunately international students in general are overrepresented in academic misconduct cases on campus, and that's something that we're working really hard to try to even that out and make sure that you are really well prepared with what you need to know so that you don't find yourself in that situation, because a lot of students really don't purposefully commit academic misconduct, but might do something that makes their professor suspect that they're doing something dishonest. So we certainly don't want any of you to wind up in that situation. So this is intended to kind of make sure that you're aware of what the expectations and resources are. All right, moving along here. So I will ask for a little bit of your participation for this presentation. So I would love if you would say things out loud, but if you're not able to do that or willing to do that, you can type the answers into the chat. So what do you think academic integrity is? When we talk about academic integrity, what does that mean? What does that bring to mind for you? So you can think about that for a sec, and then feel free to unmute yourself and give some answers, or again, you can type them into the chat. So what does that mean, academic integrity? Fairness, right? So everyone is being fair and honest. Someone says everything you must share must be your own original work. Absolutely, we will talk a lot about that. No one's cheating, absolutely. Some of these are being sent to everyone. Some of them are just coming to me privately, so I will read the answers as they come in. So you're all definitely on the right track here. I'm going to change my view here for a moment so I can see our presentation better. There we go. Okay. So academic integrity, if you look at a dictionary definition of integrity, it means something is whole. It's complete or undivided. And basically what that means in this context is that you are not breaking your own moral code or the code that is set by the university, that is staying whole. So in an academic context, that means that you're being honest, you are taking pride in your own work, and knowing part of that is handing in your own work, not copying something, for instance, from someone else or from a website, and not cheating or helping others cheat. And I want to say, kind of as I alluded to at the beginning, we give this presentation not because we assume that you're going to be dishonest or that we think that you're going to set out to cheat or take shortcuts in your work. Most students do not do those things. The point is really that we know that there are students out there who occasionally will make a bad decision. And we'll talk a little bit about the situations where that's more likely to occur. But also because there could be situations where even if you are doing these things, it could appear that you're not. And there are just lots of different individual scenarios where students unintentionally find themselves in a situation where they unintentionally or unintentionally are not handing in their best work. So, you know, that's, it's not because we think that you're going to start out your program with the intention of committing academic misconduct. But you should be doing all these things, being honest, taking pride in your work, doing your own work. And from a practical standpoint, a lot of this is based on understanding what your professors expect from you. And following the course rules for individual courses, which might be different from course to course. And some of those rules will be written rules that are actually in your syllabus. And some of them might be rules that your professors will actually just sort of assume that you understand, and might even be unspoken rules. So this is where it's really tricky if you're maybe studying in a US university for the first time or are not as familiar with the academic system here, because the expectations might be different from in your home country. And a lot of international students, when I meet with them after they're charged with academic misconduct, say that things are just so different here, they didn't know that they weren't allowed to do what they did or things like that. So it is important to kind of be aware of what those expectations are. And if you're not sure what they are, know that it's always okay to ask questions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So upholding integrity, that may mean taking some risks. It may mean risk getting a bad grade on an assignment if you maybe haven't managed your time very well, and know that you aren't going to be able to, again, hand in your best work. It takes some courage to hand in an inferior product when you know that maybe you could have looked something up online and cheated and handed in something better that way. So you may have to take that risk, but also learn to develop some strong time management skills so that you don't find yourself in a situation where you're tempted to take a shortcut. Also, you know, thinking down the line, your grades and your diploma should stand for something real. And you want the person next to you also to have done all their own work, because if they're getting the same grade as you on an assignment or the same degree as you from Ohio State, there will be more value to your degree and to your grade in an individual class if everyone has been doing their work honestly. And academic integrity really is for everyone. It's obviously not just for students. It's also a really important issue for professors and researchers and staff like me on campus. I can't put things in this presentation that are plagiarized. That would not be ethical. And there is an office at the university for research conduct as well. So that oversees whether professors and researchers are doing their research appropriately and effectively. So it's not just a student issue. It's really something, again, that if you move on in academia in your career, that will follow you there as well. If you're publishing papers one day, those will be reviewed for plagiarism and that kind of thing. So we've talked about academic integrity now, which is kind of the positive side. On the negative side, what is academic misconduct? So maybe you can either say it out loud or type into the chat. What would kind of the opposite be academic misconduct? Don't be shy. Feel free to Feel free to chime in. Taking advantage of others somehow, yeah, that's definitely part of it. Something that would put others at a disadvantage. So I'll tell you how the university defines it. So any kind of academic dishonesty, the definition that is in the Code of Student Conduct is any activity that tends to compromise the academic integrity of the university's educational and academic process. So that's a little bit of a wordy definition, but basically anything that's going to undermine the university's educational mission to not work the way that it's supposed to. It looks like a couple other people typed things into the chat. Cheating in exams or helping others cheat in the exams, as well as sharing others' work as if it's your own work, therefore mislead others, definitely. Taking others' ideas into own assignment without mention, yes. And we will definitely talk about using other people's work without giving them credit. So absolutely. So just to give you some more examples of academic misconduct, the type of things that we see students charged with, cheating of any kind, copying another student's work, working with another student without permission, so what is called unauthorized collaboration, plagiarism, which we'll spend a little more time on, falsifying lab results, which is usually more of an issue at the graduate level, possession or use of unauthorized materials in an exam. And this is another common one that I'll spend a little more time on in a minute. And anything, this last one here, violation of course rules or assignment guidelines. It should say violation of course rules. I need to fix that. That's something that we see sort of tacked onto a lot of other charges. So very often someone would be charged with copying in violation of course rules and assignment guidelines. There might be something in the syllabus that the student has gone against that maybe doesn't fit one of the other categories easily, but that is a common one that we see for students when they're charged. So there is a code of student conduct that sort of governs what students are and are not allowed to do at the university. So every student, so all of you are expected to be familiar with the Code of Student Conduct. You can find the document on a number of different websites, OSU websites. I give one of the links here. And it's not a very fun document to read. It's very dry, but it basically outlines not just academic expectations, but also all conduct on campus, you know, conduct for the residence hall, conduct for all kinds of situations, what you are and aren't allowed to do. And it's important to know that ignorance of the code is not considered an excuse for having broken the code. So if you do something wrong and say, oh, I didn't know I wasn't allowed to do that, that's not considered a reason to be found not in violation. So you are expected to know what the rules are. So I would recommend taking a moment to look through the Code of Student Conduct if you have a chance before classes start. We won't look at the whole thing today, but we will highlight some of the common areas where students run up against it. So how is academic misconduct handled? So like I have mentioned a couple times, there is something called the Committee on Academic Misconduct, which we also often call COAM for short. And it is the office that's responsible for evaluating charges of academic misconduct. So course instructors submit suspicions to COAM, basically charges to COAM, but they are not the ones who decide the outcome of a case. So this is really important distinction to understand. So if you're in a class and one of your instructors thinks that you have cheated in some way, let's say they think that you were looking at your cell phone during an exam, they are not allowed to automatically fail you on that exam. What they have to do is report the case to COAM, and then COAM looks at it, and their staff, faculty, and students, they look at that case and see if they agree with the professor that something fishy happened. And if so, then they give sanctions for the case. And the professor usually is instructed to have some kind of grade change if the person was in violation. So when a student is charged, they have two choices. You could either take responsibility for the charge if you admit that you did what you're accused of, or if you don't think that you did anything wrong, you could not take responsibility. And the way that it's handled in those two cases is different. So if you're taking responsibility and admitting to what happened, you can have the case resolved by what's called administrative decision. And you would never have to meet in person with the committee. You basically just do everything with them over email. They look at your case and then decide what your sanctions or like punishments should be. If you contest the charge, so if you don't take responsibility, you would have a hearing in front of the COAM panel. And Jacob on the call is one of our panelists, and I'll have him talk a little bit later about what that experience is like. But the panel is made up of faculty and students who hear both sides of the story. They hear what the student has to say about what happened. They hear from the course instructor, and then the panel makes a decision about whether that student should be considered to have committed academic misconduct. So those are the two ways that a case can be resolved. If a student is found in violation, they would get both a grade sanction, so a lower grade either on the assignment or in the entire course, and a disciplinary sanction such as probation for some period of time, which is like a warning period, or in really, really serious cases, students can be suspended or even dismissed from the university for having committed academic misconduct. So it's definitely a very serious thing, and the sanctions can be pretty significant. The most common sanctions are that students will get a grade of 0 on the assignment, and usually some further reduction in their final course grade, and also be put on disciplinary probation for some period of time, such as a year or until graduation. And feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Feel free to say something or type it into the chat if I'm going too fast. So if you're charged, obviously I hope that none of you will ever have to go through this process, but statistically speaking, it's possible that one or two of you could have this experience. So if you're charged, if you're suspected by an instructor of academic misconduct, I would say your focus really should be to explain to COAM, not even necessarily to your instructor themselves, because they're not the one making the decision about your case, but explain to COAM exactly what happened from your point of view as clearly and honestly as you can. If you did something wrong, admit it. If you don't think you did anything wrong, then you can contest the charge. So I would definitely recommend requesting a hearing if you really think that you're not in violation, or if you think that you're not in violation of all the things that you're charged with. So don't expect responsibility for charges if you don't think that you're in violation. I see students who do that just because they don't want to go through the process of the hearing, but it's definitely worth it if you don't think that you're in violation. And also know that there is an appeal process. So if you get the outcome of your case and you don't think it's fair, you can appeal to the provost's office. Also, you can come talk to me. So I'm our office's liaison for the Committee on Academic Misconduct, and I meet with a lot of students now, that's via Zoom, who have been charged, who kind of just want to talk about their options, talk about how the process works. So you could always contact me for a meeting, and don't panic. So a lot of students really will get very, very concerned, understandably, about what's going to happen with their case. And sometimes it really throws off their whole semester. Sometimes they have trouble eating, they have trouble sleeping, and get very, very upset about the situation, which I think is justified, but I think you also have to kind of make sure that you're staying on track in your other classes and not letting the psychological stress of the situation get to you too much, or finding ways to manage that. All right, so also just be aware that there are immigration implications that can come up in the more serious cases. So because your immigration status in the US, and I know some of you aren't actually in the US yet, but for those of you who are, if you're here in active F or J status, your immigration status in the US is dependent on your being a full-time student at Ohio State. So if anything gets in the way of that, if you are suspended, for instance, from the university for a semester and not allowed to enroll due to academic misconduct violations, we could not keep your active record here at OSU. We would either have to transfer you to another institution, or you would have to have your record terminated and you would depart from the US. You know, every year I work with maybe 5 or 6 students who are either suspended or dismissed due to COAM violations. So it's definitely something that happens more than it should. It is a real life issue that students deal with. So, you know, just be aware that there can be implications for your legal status in the US as a result of these types of cases. So to talk a little bit more about some of the behaviors themselves that students you know, find themselves doing that maybe are not okay, or what you can do to make sure that you're following expectations. One of the main ones I want to talk about is, when is it okay to work on an assignment with friends? So let's say that you're in a class with some people you know, and some of you who are in graduate programs are going to be in a small cohort. You're all going to get to know each other really well. You'll probably want to share information and ideas, which in a lot of ways is great, but it's good to understand when it's okay or not okay to work with friends. So just very generally speaking, what do you think the basic guidelines are there? Does anyone maybe want to type into the chat some ideas on when it would be appropriate to work with friends on an assignment, or not appropriate?
I didn't quite get the question.
So the question is, when would it be okay to collaborate with other students? So, and obviously this is going to be really different depending on the class and depending on this, you know, the individual scenario. But let's say that you have a homework assignment from a professor. It's due in 3 days. When would it be okay to go to a friend and ask them for some help if you're confused? Or when would it be okay to sit down with your roommate and look at a project together? Or when would it not be okay? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's like, well, some of the project will require you to group with some of the people.
Yeah.
And then I think in that case, it's okay to work with your friend. Otherwise, like those projects that, let's take an example, is a math question, something, and then you have to do that yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So you will have inevitably group projects in class, and clearly for those it's okay to work with your group mates. You're expected to collaborate with your group mates, but I would say kind of the default, unless something is specifically a group project, you really should err on the side of doing all your own work. I see that someone has typed in, it would not be okay if the friend you asked for help already did that course and task. Yeah, so you are supposed to be handing in your own work and your own ideas. So really anytime that you are going to a friend or a classmate for help, without the instructor's permission specifically, you're getting into a little bit of a risky territory. So one of us is saying, if the instructor of the course specifically says it's okay to collaborate with friends, yes. And there will be situations where your instructor will be say, it's fine for you to work together on this, just make sure that what you hand in is your own work. So if they specifically tell you, yeah, I want you to talk about this with other people in the class, then it should be fine. But I would say, if you have a question, what I see a lot is that students will maybe not understand what they're supposed to do for an assignment. So rather than go to the instructor for help, they'll go to a friend for help, and then get a little bit too much help from that friend and end up copying information from that friend and handing in the same work as the friend. And that's where we see students getting charged with things like copying and unauthorized collaboration. So again, err on the side of always doing your own work. And if you're confused about an assignment or just don't know what to do, then go to your instructor for help rather than someone else in the class. So, you know, like I mentioned before, work independently. American academic culture really does put an emphasis on originality and individuality, which may be very different from the culture that you come from. So this might be a little bit of an adjustment depending on your background. So another area where I want you to be really careful is with like group chat groups that you might be asked to join by classmates. So sometimes a whole class will set up like a texting group or a WhatsApp group or a group me or something to talk about the class. sometimes classes are really, really challenging, and it helps to sort of get some tutoring or something from classmates. But if it's not an official group that the instructor has sanctioned, we see students getting into a lot of trouble with that, especially if they're sharing actual answers to exam questions or maybe materials that you're not supposed to have. So just be really, really cautious about joining that kind of class. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're ever not sure about something, what's allowed, what's not, just ask your instructor. So let's talk now a little bit more about plagiarism, because that's another big one that we see students often kind of confused on what the rules are. And this is one that, especially for graduate students, tends to be an area where students get tripped up. So what is plagiarism? Does anyone want to try to define that for me? What does that mean, plagiarism?
Like stealing the work the other people do.
Yeah, so it could be thought of as stealing someone else's words or ideas. Oftentimes, you know, we usually refer to plagiarism for written assignments. If you take a direct quotation that you found somewhere else and put it into your own writing and don't make it clear that it's not your own writing, that would be plagiarism. Not referring someone else's work. Yeah, so if you quote someone else's work but don't reference where you found it, or don't say who the original author is, then that is plagiarism. So the unattributed use of another author's words or ideas. And this can also be for not just written words, but pictures too. If you copy an image and maybe a photograph that someone else took online, and if you put that into your work and don't say where you found it, that could also be considered plagiarism. Looks like someone else put something in the chat. Let me check that real fast. Copying others' words as one's own. Yes, absolutely, can be plagiarism. So we're going to look at some examples of that. So whenever you're using a direct quotation, so you're going to be doing a lot of research papers, probably regardless of what your field of study is. So if you find a quotation that you think it's helpful to use in your own writing, if you're going to cite it, if you're going to put it into your own writing word for word, if it's a direct quotation, you have to put quotation marks around the direct quotation. And then you also have to, at the end of the passage, put in parentheses who the author is. And there are different formats for doing this. And you can find out in your academic department what style they want you to use, but usually there's also a parenthetical citation at the end with the author and the year or the page number, things like that. So this is just an example. Let's say that you were doing a research paper that had to do with pandas. You could start off in your own words saying the research of Liu and his co-authors has found that, and starting the quotation here, giant pandas are likely to select bamboo groves with higher biomass while avoiding steep slopes. So this is just kind of a random example, but it shows how you can put quotation marks around a direct citation. And you see those three little dots there. That's to indicate that you have taken out some of the text because you didn't need the whole thing, but you're continuing along with what it said later in the quotation. So that's one way that you can shorten it. To look at another example, so plagiarism is not just for direct quotation, but you have to think about it too when you're summarizing what someone else has said. So if you're not quoting word for word, but if you use an idea from another author or reference someone else's research, you still have to give them credit in the text. So you can't make it sound like you came up with it yourself. So what you could say in your paper would be, for instance, research done by Liu and his co-authors suggests that giant pandas specifically choose a habitat with a high bamboo biomass. And then you put, again, that parenthetical citation of the author and the year. So this here, you didn't think of that or discover that yourself, so you have to say where you did. So that would be summarizing or paraphrasing. And then also remember that for most of what you write, you have to include a bibliography, which is basically a list of all of the references all of the texts that you referenced in your paper. So this shows one way of doing that. And on the library's website, they actually have a really handy tool that I can maybe bring it up at the end, where you can have them format the bibliography for you, so you don't have to worry about all the little details of what comes first and next and everything. So I will try to find that at the end because it's really helpful. And so another thing to just be really careful about is that you'll, you know, a lot of times what happens when students are charged with plagiarism is that they just basically copy and paste things directly from what they found usually on the internet, into their paper and don't say where it's from. And sometimes those are sites that they really shouldn't be on in the first place. So I would say avoid websites. You may or may not already be familiar with them. Things like Chegg and Course Hero, where those are not so much for, it's really more for like the sciences and math, but a lot of students, for instance, in engineering will look up the solution to a problem and then just copy that directly into their own exam or homework. So you really will just want to completely avoid websites like that, I would say, because you're not handing in your own work if you found the solution online. So again, I've said it a million times already, but always do your own work and find your own solutions and answers when you're submitting assignments. So let's look at a couple other examples of written work of citing things properly and what's okay and what's not. So let's say that you are let's say that you're in a biology class and you are doing a project where you're researching butterfly behavior. And let's say that you find this article that you think you want to cite in your paper because it has a lot of good information. And you find this passage that you want to cite where it says, like most migratory species, monarch butterflies, it gives the scientific name, must stop frequently during their long southward migration to rest and refuel. And the places where they stop are important for the success of the migration. And it goes on, and you really want to use that passage in your paper. So let's say that you write your paper and it looks like this. So let's say this is what you're handing in to your professor, and it says, like most migratory species, monarch butterflies must stop frequently during their long southward migration to rest and refuel, blah, 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 blah. So tell me, is this plagiarism or is this not plagiarism? Would this be okay or would this not be okay? What has this person done here? Maybe you can just type yes or no into the chat if you think yes, this would be okay to hand in, or no, this would not be okay to hand in. So I will, yeah, I'm seeing a no coming in. No. So this is the abstract again, if you want to look at it. And then this is what the student said. Yeah, so this is not okay because clearly this person has just directly copied and pasted exactly what was in the scientific article into their own paper. There's no mention of who the authors of this work was. There are no quotation marks here. There's no parenthetical citation. This is just straight and simple plagiarized. We see students do this amazingly. So this is definitely not okay. So what about this example? So this, I'll read you this one too. Like most species that migrate, monarch butterflies often have to take a break during their long migration southward to rest and get more energy. And the places where they stop are vital for the migration success. Blah, 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 blah. So what about this? What has this person done? I'll just tell you, this is also not what you should do in your paper, but why not? What is wrong with this example? And this is maybe even more common of what we see, particularly, I'm just going to say undergraduate students doing sometimes. Yeah, so this person has rephrased, we would say maybe paraphrased or It's honestly a very bad paraphrase of the original article. So this person has really just kind of switched out a couple of words here and there with synonyms. This would still not be considered original writing. And is there any reference here to who the original authors were who came up with these ideas? No, there's no indication of where this person found this information. So this is still not okay. So we do see students handing in assignments like this, which is going to get them charged with academic misconduct. So you want to stay away from a paraphrase that is really still not your own original work. You still need to work a little harder than that on it. So in this next example here, let's look at this one. So in their study, and then it gives the name of the study, researchers John McCord and Andrew Davis state, and then you see some quotation marks there, like most migratory species, monarch butterflies, blah, blah, blah. Then at the end of that sentence, you'll see the parenthetical citation. So is this one okay? Is this looking better? Maybe type in yes or no if you think this is okay. Yeah, this one's okay. I'm not saying this is an amazing piece of writing or anything, but this person has properly cited the source. They have not made it look like this was their own idea. They gave credit to the original authors. It would be very easy to go and find this paper if someone reading it wanted to do that. So this is okay. You know, this may seem very basic, and it is very basic, but we see students handing in papers like these other ones. So just to make sure that that is not something that happens to you. So I'm going to give one more example, then we're going to move on to a couple another type of activity. And I'll go through this one a little more quickly, but so let's say that you were in a paper this time that was studying ancient Rome, and you were doing a paper on the history of souvenirs. If you're not familiar with that word souvenir, basically let's say you take a vacation somewhere and you want to bring something back with you that will remind you of that place. Like let's say you go to the beach and you buy a seashell necklace from someone by the shore. That would be a souvenir that you would bring back home to remind you of the trip. So that's what this article is about. This is quoted from the article. Romans seem to have conceived of commercial objects that could commemorate and remind viewers of places, events, and people. Certainly Romans were at pains to preserve memory through means material as well as literary, blah, 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 blah. That kind of goes on. So let's say you thought that this passage would be important to quote in a paper that you were writing. So here's another example of something that a student hands in. Let's say that this is what you handed into your professor. Romans seem to have conceived of commercial objects that commemorate and remind viewers of places, events, and people. I think we can agree that this, again, is plagiarism. I don't see any quotation marks here. I don't see any reference to the original authors. So this would not be okay. Let's look at this one. So Maggie Popkin in her article, Urban Images in Glass from the Late Roman Empire, blah, 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 argues that Romans seem to have conceived of commercial objects that could commemorate and remind viewers of places, events, and people. Certainly Romans were at pains to preserve memory through means material as well as literary. So is this person, maybe in this chat, type in yes or no again of whether this person has properly cited the source and avoided plagiarism. Is this okay? It is, yeah, so this is still not okay. You are correct, Ilker. And do you want to tell us why it's not okay? What is still missing here? Or anyone can. There's no citation. Yeah, so there still is not quotation marks around the actual quotation, which would be here, you know, Romans seem to have conceived of blah, blah, blah. This person did a better job in that they say where they found the information. So that's good, but they still have not put quotation marks around the direct quotation, and they still haven't used that parenthetical citation at the end. So good job noticing that. This is also better. You know, we have the quotation marks around the direct quote, but you would still need to put at the end here the name of the author and, you know, depending on the format, the year, the page, or what have you. All right, so here's a correct citation. Any questions about that before we move on? Feel free to stop me if any of this is unclear or really new. And if you want to follow up with me later too, to talk about any of these details, feel free to send me an email and I don't mind talking about it that way too. All right, if no one has any questions, I think we'll move on. I want to get to some of our other examples. Oh, before then, yeah, so I encourage you to develop a strong writing process. So something that I hear from students a lot, and I know that COAM does as well, is I forgot to put the quotation marks and citations before handing in my paper, or I handed in the wrong draft that didn't have the proper citations. So try to develop a writing process that does not involve having a draft that doesn't have proper citations. So, you know, you have to be really careful as you're doing research and as you're going along to keep track of your sources and to keep track of where you're finding different quotes. So if you're doing research and you're maybe copying and pasting things that you find off the internet or writing down things that you found in a book at the library, you have to make sure you're writing down where you found that information and keeping track of it as you go along. And I would also emphasize, you know, your professors, they do not care how well you can copy and paste things. It's good to do research and to find the quotes that support your arguments, and it's important to do that. But what they care about are your own ideas and how you express them in a paper, and how you back them up or contextualize them with outside source material. So it's, you know, the goal is not to just hand in what someone else primarily has already said. You should really be using quotations from other sources in your paper to support your own ideas. So again, try to develop a writing process that doesn't make it possible to just forget all the quotation marks, which is what sometimes students say happens. Okay, I'm going to shift gears for just a second, talk about test-taking behavior. This is particularly, I think, for undergrads, an area where we see students get in a lot of trouble. So in an in-person exam, so you maybe this semester, but certainly throughout your academic career, have some in-person exams. Don't talk to other students even about non-test related topics. Sometimes students before a test starts, will be sitting near a friend and talk about like, oh, do you want to go to the mall this weekend or what have you. The professor could see you talking and think you were sharing exam answers. So just don't talk to other people at all in an exam as a rule of thumb. Don't have anything written on your body, even non-test related items. So I've seen students charged with academic misconduct because they wrote like a friend's phone number on their hand, but then the proctor for the test walks by and sees that they have things written on their hand and are charged with academic misconduct. So be really careful about that. And don't have your cell phone out or interact in any way with your cell phone, no matter what is going on in your life. A lot of times students say, oh, well, my mom is really sick and I was waiting for a message from my dad to see how she was doing and I was looking at my phone to check my messages. If your professor sees you looking at your phone during an exam, you will be charged with academic misconduct. So just put your phone away and don't interact with it at all. And obviously keep your eyes from wandering. Even if you're not trying to cheat or look at other people's papers, we do see people charged with academic misconduct when they were just sort of staring off into space. In an online exam, so you will this semester definitely be taking a lot of your tests in Carmen in the online environment. So don't switch in and out of the Carmen quiz page or test page when you're completing an assignment, because it could look like you were looking up answers, and the system does actually record how often you go in and out. So that's something we see leading to academic misconduct charges. Another really important point, which Jacob reminded me of when I was preparing this, was a lot of students get in trouble because they think that having an open book exam, which sometimes a professor will say you're allowed to look at the textbook for the class when you're taking the exam. That doesn't mean you can look at any material or any online material. It's not necessarily open book as in being open any source from anywhere. You have to make sure you're just looking at the sources that are approved by your instructor. So make sure you're really clear on that before the exam starts. Also, make sure you have a really stable internet connection before you start taking an exam, because sometimes students say, oh, it crashed in the middle and I had to retake it, or I had to restart. And sometimes that can look kind of fishy. So just be really careful about that. And I also see students sometimes who will think they're not doing well on an exam, and they'll like close out of the online exam halfway through, and then not be able to get in again, and will end up failing the exam because they didn't complete it. And that's not so much an academic misconduct issue. That's more like an exam anxiety issue, but just kind of as another note for online exams. So I just want to highlight those things because we do see students consistently making those kinds of mistakes. All right, so let's see, I'm seeing something pop up in the chat here. In case our internet is not stable, could we go to the university and use the internet there? I live off campus, my internet is good. Yes, so I would say that is something to think about. So the libraries are a good option for that. They should have very stable connections there, any of the library locations on campus. And you can also reserve a study room at the library. So that might be a good idea for taking an exam, would be to reserve one of the small rooms at the library to do the exam in a quiet place where you know you'll have a consistent connection. All right, so we're running a little low on time, but I think we can still do our other examples because I think some of these will kind of help contextualize things a little bit. So these examples are going to show some students who are charged with academic misconduct. Now, I want to emphasize these are not real students. I made them up for the purposes of this presentation, so I'm not showing you a real student who's been charged with academic misconduct, but these cases are sort of based off of things that I've seen in real life, so I think they'll still be helpful. So we have Belinha. She is from Portugal, and she is an undergrad who's majoring in computer science and engineering, and she is in an engineering class and is charged with unauthorized collaboration or sharing of information. So I'm going to read you a little scenario of what happened in her case. So bear with me while I pull this up. You can actually read along with me here. So this is what happens, and I want you to tell me whether you think that she should be found in violation. So Belinha is enrolled in CSE 2431, and a friend in the class is organizing a GroupMe chat for the course. Belinha joins the group, which becomes very active throughout the semester, with students often sharing suggestions for homework. The professor notices that students are starting to hand in really similar answers and suspects that they might be collaborating. He finds out from one of the students about the GroupMe and reports all the students in the group to COAM. Belinha herself received the messages but never actively participated. She didn't reply to the text, and she still did all her own work. She had access to the information that was shared, but she says she didn't use it. So this is fairly common scenario. So do you think that she should be found in violation? So do you think she did anything wrong? Maybe type in yes or no to our chat. So Nanshan is saying guilty. All right, just for the sake of time, I'm gonna move on here. So this person, and I'm just making this up based on what I often see, but this person was found, so she requested a panel hearing because she didn't think she did anything wrong, but she was found in violation, but her sanction was pretty light. She was only given a formal letter of reprimand, which is like the least bad outcome you can have, and she wasn't given any grade reduction because she really wasn't using the information that was shared, and the panel, I guess, was convinced of that. Jacob, is there anything you want to add to that example of what you see in like cases that you've observed that involve group chats?
Yeah, so like I just want to add a little bit on this. Basically, like if you're in the group chat, if anyone in the case, like for example, like you're in this group chat, group me, or like WeChat group, WhatsApp group, like whatever the group chat you're using, if any students in there shared like a example of like a previous test or like anything that's related with like cheating or like plagiarism, the everyone in that group chat, no matter you see it or not, you'll be charged with the COAM charges just because you're present in that group chat.
Yeah, thank you. So like I mentioned earlier, just please be really careful about joining those in the first place, because even though it seems like it's going to be really helpful, you could end up kind of finding yourself in trouble. Let's go on to our next student. So Eunha is from South Korea. She's a psychology major, and she's in a class which is not for her major, the science of food. And she is charged with falsification, fabrication, or dishonesty in lab results. So let me, gotta kind of switch back and forth here between my different sheets. And let's read about what she did. So this student is taking a food science class that she registered for to fulfill a GE, which is the general education requirements, and because it sounded fun. And I think those classes are fun. I've heard students who've really enjoyed them. The class isn't for her major, so she isn't putting as much time or effort into it as her other courses. For one assignment, the class must eat pieces of fruit over the course of 1 week. So this is a real assignment that I saw with a COAM case, and analyze how the taste changes as the fruit ripens. They are supposed to take a picture of the fruit to go along with each analysis, but Eunha doesn't remember about the photos until the end of the week. But she did eat the fruit samples all along. So she searches the internet for pictures of fruit that might be similar to what she needs and includes those in her assignment. It's pretty obvious to her professor that Eunha didn't take the pictures herself and reports the case to COAM. So maybe, again, type in to the chat if you think that she is in violation. So yes or no, do you think that she did anything wrong? Okay, I don't see them in here. Yes, in violation. Yes, so I think it's pretty clear, you know, if she handed in pictures that she was supposed to have taken herself but didn't, that would be considered a violation. So this person didn't have a hearing. They had an administrative decision. She decided to take responsibility for the charges. And for a case like this, I think we would see someone put on probation for a year and get a grade of 0 on the assignment and a further reduction in the final course grade by 1/3 letter. So that's kind of a typical outcome for what we see for a lot of cases. And definitely stop me if you have any questions about this. Jacob, is there anything you want to add about a case like that?
I don't think so. For this one, like if you took the administrative decision, then like you would just get it. Like it's different for like hearing, because like it won't be judged by your individual like basis. So everything will be given by the COAM coordinator, and like so the case essentially like everything you get, unless you appear to the provost, then you will just receive this as like disciplinary probation for like 1 year. That's reasonable from like a COAM coordinator.
All right, great, thank you. All right, and one last example. So we have a student now who is a marketing major in a history class and is charged with plagiarism. So this one is maybe a little bit more complicated. So for Meng's history class, whoops, let me go up here. He must submit a final research paper worth 50% of his final course grade. He's feeling stressed about some things in his personal life. His parents are getting divorced and his grandfather just passed away. So he's having trouble concentrating on schoolwork and has not let himself put much time into work on his paper. Meng is writing about Europe during World War II, and online he finds a transcription of a speech made by Winston Churchill in 1944, and he wants to quote it in his paper. He copies and pastes the passages he wants from the internet into his paper, puts the passages in quotation marks, and says that they are from Churchill's speech, but he doesn't make a note of the website where he found the speech, so he doesn't give the link either in his paper or in his Bibliography. Monk's professor found a copy of the speech anywhere. He just happened to find it on that particular website. So do you think in that scenario that he should be found? This is being very slow to pull back up here. So what do you think about that situation? I'm seeing a no, but I'm not sure if that was for this one or for the previous one. In any case, yeah, that would still not be considered okay. So if you are quoting something, you do have to give credit to where you actually found that quotation, even if it's someone quoting someone else. You can't pretend like you had the original source or just kind of bypass that middle thing that you found. So we do see cases that hinge around that kind of scenario sometimes. So you'll want to be careful about that. So, you know, this I think would also, we might also see someone put on probation for that. Alrighty, so that I believe was all of my examples. I will just very quickly give you a couple of resources. So you may have seen in some of our pre-arrival emails that we have an academic preparation website where there's some more in-depth information on academic conduct and misconduct. The Writing Center is a good resource if you ever want someone to give your paper another set of eyes before you hand it in. University Libraries has a lot of really great resources online for research and citation, and especially for grad students, if you're getting farther along in your research and doing a thesis or dissertation, they have some helpful programs that can help you manage your references. The Dennis Learning Center is also a great place I refer people all the time if they kind of need general help with academic kind of stuff. So at this point, I know we are kind of reaching the end, but I want to give Jacob a chance to share a little bit more information from his point of view, if there's anything else he wants to add about what he sees as a panelist.
Yeah, so like just kind of add on to like the general information we just shared. I'm also like shared one more resource, which is the Student Advocacy Center. That's like on our campus. Basically, this is the office that's essentially advocating for students. So if you if you are charged with co-am cases and if you're going to a hearing, you're allowed to bring like one person with you. So usually students bring like a lawyer or like their parent, or sometimes students bring like an advocate from Student Advocacy Center. So if you are charged with any cases, please feel free to reach out to them. I just kind of want to like add on a little bit on like and kind of like conceptualize how does this entire process look like. So it's really confusing for international students because essentially like the entire co-am cases and how the hearing functions is like American jury system. Basically there are five panelists present for each hearing. So like my suggestion here is like if you can take a case to like the hearing, you would rather take it to hearing rather than like take an administrative decision, because administrative decision sometimes it gives you like harsh like judgment that's not like based on the evidence you can submit to the hearing. But when it's at a hearing, will have faculty members and students sitting on there and listening to narrate like what's your perspective on the case and how this things like pans out for you. Couple of things I want to highlight, because like on the digital learning environment this year, like there's a spiking number of co-am cases, not only just among like international students and scholars at OSU, but among like all the students, because a lot of things are related with like Carmen, which is our like the website and the platform we use to essentially taking quizzes and teaching and exams, things like that. If you switch out like the web page during like a Carmen exam, then that's considered as academic misconduct, because that's technically in violation of course rules, because the instructors has no idea of like what are you doing. You might be like checking a timer, you also might be like Googling like the answers like online. So like when the case is like that cannot be judged, then that's left off for like the entire panel to interpret like what were you doing like during that time, and you as a student being there will be asked to prove yourself. the system itself, like, is kind of a low-key messed up in this third kind of scenario, because like the presumption of guilt and implicit bias can be playing a role into this, which means like students in there, like you will need to make like a really strong case for yourself, like to advocate for yourself. And for like previous cases I've seen is like a lot of cases recently like related with like the idea of the open book. That's one of the biggest thing like students get charges with COAM charges, because like basically like professors can see like open book, open resource, even professors can say like open online resource, but that doesn't mean you can use all online resources, including things like Chang or like Course Hero. That's only limited to like Google or any like Google Scholar, things like that. And you still need to cite the resources. And if you don't do so, and like can still be interpreted as COAM charges. But please always like feel free to share like how you feel like this case should be like judged by during the hearing panel. If you get like charged with like COAM charges, like unfortunately, and always share this with your friends, like always take things up for the hearing panel, share everything with the faculty members and students representatives sitting on there, and they will be able to give you like a fair judgment. And after that, no matter what happened, feel free to appeal to the provost of like Office of Academic Affairs, Provost McPherson. So the Office of Provost will judge like if this like sanction or like this greater sanction and this disciplinary sanction is like adequate, and they can give you like changes on that. They can revoke it, but at the same time they can also like put like even harsher judgment on that. So that's like all left up for you to decide if you want to do it. But essentially like appeal to the provost is the only way to get off of it. And a couple of things I want to highlight about disciplinary probation. That's like the regular thing we give out to students, and it's really common. Like even like you cheated on like plagiarized on a 2% assignment, which is like an essay. So like you can get a grade reduction for like 1/3 the letter grade. Means like if you get a B plus, then you're gonna end up with a B. You're gonna get a B minus. You're gonna end up with a C plus. But at the same time, grade sanction and disciplinary sanction, they're combined. So with disciplinary sanction, they're ranked from formal reprimand, means you get an email says like, don't do this again, please, and or you can be dismissed from the university. Like last month, I was served on a panel which just dismissed a student from the university because that was their like third offenses like for COAM charges. And things like this are real. They're not like we're just talking about it. Some students are getting dismissed. Students are actually getting kicked out of the university for that. And for the other charges as disciplinary probation for one academic year, which means like you're from the fall semester to the end of your spring semester. If you're enrolled in the fall semester, you cannot opt out of it. Even you just decide to like, oh, I'm gonna take a gap year. That doesn't then, but like all the disciplinary probations, they're active upon re-enrollment. So if you re-enroll back to Ohio State, then like it will still be effective. And when like things you have like disciplinary probation, it's a really like bad thing for you to have like at Ohio State. Essentially, it won't stay on your record. Once you graduate from Ohio State, it will be gone. No graduate school will see that, and or like no like any future programs you will be applying will see that. But like all like your employer, the only thing that's affect you is that you cannot participate in study abroad program, and a lot of student clubs like they don't want you to join if you have a disciplinary probation. Like personally speaking, for undergraduate student government, you cannot run for any like senator position or like for executive position if you will have like charges as disciplinary probation, which means like you will lose a lot of opportunities and scholarships, programs you might be applying, and those can all be like affected by that. So that sometimes a lot of students like don't look into that. They think like, oh, it's fine, I get this, and like it doesn't affect like my GPA and it doesn't impact my other things, but it actually impacts the student experience heavily. And lastly, another thing I want to add on is like, don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, because COAM runs on a really strict rule. So it's basically like COAM encourage every single like professors, faculty members, TA, teaching assistant to report any suspicious cases, which means that they're obligated to do so. It's like they would rather have like a false alarm instead of a miss. So like if your cases sometimes can just be like, you didn't cheat at all, but you just get reported for COAM because like our university is dedicated to protect like the academic integrity of our entire university. But this system essentially is also serving the administration and our university's academic integrity, but it jeopardizes like students like harm students like benefits in this, and also it causes like students to panic in all these kind of scenarios, because sometimes like you didn't cheat at all, you didn't plagiarize, you didn't violate the course rules, but students would be like, I'm stressing out in this, I don't want to go to the hearing, I will just take the academic like the administrative decision. Then that will be judged by the COAM coordinator with the evidence that's submitted by the instructor. That means that it's likely it's going to be charged with like COAM, be fined in violation. That's like a low key, like what we see like finding guilty, but we don't want to say that because like this is not a judicial system. So like in that entire process, it's like actually better for you to take it up for hearing and advocate for yourself. And don't be afraid to email people, email instructor and tell them that, because instructors also being put into a really harsh position in this. If they like fail to report any COAM cases, they can be like fired from the university, or like they will lose their job, like they will lose their research fund, things like that. So it's also like professors are stressing out in this scenario too. Yeah, so those are the 3 points I want to say. And like if you all have any questions, feel free to like ask right now. And yep.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jacob. Definitely feel free to chime in with some questions. There are a couple, just before I forget, and I know we're running out of time here, but I just wanted to mention a couple things that your points reminded me of. One is that, you know, most of the students that I see have a hearing are found in violation, but I want to emphasize that a lot of students, if they truly haven't done anything wrong, are found not in violation. So it's not a foregone conclusion that if you have a case, you'll definitely be found guilty of that. So, you know, you definitely have a chance to tell your side of the story and present your point of view and be cleared of your charges. The other thing that I want to just emphasize is that cases are confidential. So it's, you know, our office, OIA, gets a copy of it because it can have implications for your immigration record, and your academic advisor might be able to see it on your record because it has, again, implications for your grades and for your courses you can register for. You might have to retake a course and things. But in general, you know, your other professors aren't going to know about the case. If you're applying to graduate school, they can't see the case on your transcript unless you were actually suspended or dismissed. It might note that. But an employer, if you're applying for a job, they're not going to have a way of requesting that information from the university. A lot of times students are concerned about that. So the cases are absolutely kept confidential. Any questions from anybody? Feel free to type those in. I know we went a little bit over, but thanks for your patience on that. I hope that you all have a really great semester. And again, I don't think that, you know, most of you will ever have to worry about a lot of the COAM issue specifically, but I hope this helped prepare you for what the expectations are with things like citing sources and working with other students and that kind of thing. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll stay on for just a minute in case anyone has some questions and things. And I will type in my email address. It looks like Jacob did too.
I put my email address in there. So if you have any friends like that's been charged with COAM cases, like on a confidential basis, if you they are feeling comfortable to reach out, like I can give out some advice on that. But technically, we're not allowed to know like details about the information about anything that's in the case, because that's technically against like federal law, and like you're not supposed to do that. But if anyone, you can feel free like ask for friends, and like what if like I'm in this scenario, what should I do? So feel free to email us at any given time. And like I think this recording will be shared like with the students. Like thank you, Caroline, for such a presentation.
So someone Sorry, someone just asked a question about where the recordings will be. They will be uploaded into the Carmen orientation course. They're not there yet. I know my colleague is working on it. I think he probably has to edit the transcripts and things, which takes a while. So I don't know exactly when they'll go up, but it should be, I would think, maybe even before the end of this week, if not probably by next week. So if you don't find them after that point, feel free to email me and we'll look at what's going on, but they'll be posted in the orientation courses. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll go ahead and end the meeting, but thanks so much again. Thank you very much, Jacob, for joining us. That was really helpful to hear your point of view as well. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.